Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, episode number 19. I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda, and we're your hosts.
Yes, and today we're talking about New Zealand.
Yeah, so we went to New Zealand from Australia. We flew from Cairns down to Brisbane.
From where, sorry?
Cairns. Just getting my Aussie on this morning. Cairns down to Brisbane and then over to Christchurch.
Yeah, and we were in Christchurch at the end of 2011, and they had the massive earthquakes there in, I think, February of 2011, so the city was still quite devastated. Do you recall what your impressions were of the city?
I remember being a little uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is probably the best feeling word that I can use to describe the way that I felt at that time. Arriving in New Zealand and getting to our hostel, which had a ton of construction happening at it. I mean, it felt uncomfortable to me. Like I felt like I shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and it was weird. I think we arrived at night, but then going out the next day, and the city was like, it very much felt like a ghost town in a lot of ways. We were staying in, I think, New Brighton was the name of the area.
Yeah.
Down by the water, and it was just super, super quiet. And then when we did go into the CBD, everything was fenced off, hardly any people around, which I actually kind of enjoyed a bit. It sounds kind of bad to say, but like I really don't like crowds. And so it was like very relaxing having so little people around. But obviously that it's the reason there aren't those people around is because they were displaced. So that's sad.
It was almost quiet in an eerie way, though, I found. It's like walking down the streets and, you know, it's noon on a Wednesday. Why aren't there people out for lunch? Like, I just trying to imagine a city that I lived for so long, like Calgary, like that on a weekday during lunch hours. Just so, like, it's eerie to me. Yeah,
it was very eerie. I did kind of have the feeling of like there might be zombies coming out, like that kind of feeling, like the town's empty, like kind of a post-apocalyptic vibe almost.
Yeah, and then going up to the fence, we could see the devastation of the earthquake. There were signs everywhere, kind of with paths as to where you were supposed to go if another earthquake happened and what you were supposed to do. And, you know, I'm from the prairies in Alberta. I really have no concept of what an earthquake feels like or what you do in that situation. And so for me, I was like, wow, it was very real. Mm-hmm. Because at that point, I'd never experienced a natural disaster firsthand. You know, you see them on the news, you read about them, you hear how awful they are. But it was the first time that I'd ever truly seen something like that in person. Yeah,
I remember at the start of the year, being in Canada, we don't get a ton of news from New Zealand, but big disasters, they put those on the news. And I was kind of disconnected from it, didn't really think much about it. And I remember showing up there and feeling like, wow, this is not pretty serious, but like crazy, the devastation here. And I remember feeling kind of bad that I didn't connect with it more earlier.
Yeah. And then I had this guilt that we were there. And I mean, that's not the right way to feel at all. Like that city needs, you know, people to be coming in and spending money, and, you know, that helps the city really by spending your money there and supporting them. But I felt like, oh, like I shouldn't be here. Like, you know, it's like something that you keep looking at, but you kind of want to turn away from. And I just.
What do you mean by that?
You know, when people talk about like
car accidents, yeah.
And it's like you want to look away, but you just can't. Like I kind of felt that on like a milder. I haven't witnessed a car crash, but I'm assuming much milder level.
Yeah, but it was like, it may not be in good taste to say it, but it is kind of cool to go to a city that has been hit by such a disaster to see what it's like firsthand.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I think it was an eye-opening experience for me, just since I'd never experienced that before. When you use the word cool, what exactly do you...
Yes.
I think just...
It's different, right? Like, yeah. I've never been to a city that's had that feeling, where it's like big and just eerie and quiet.
And kind of, it's almost like standing there looking at the devastation. I was like, no, this is like a film set.
Well, that's what it felt like.
Like this is the film of Godzilla or something.
I think it's common when you experience something new, your mind kind of automatically relates it to other things. And what I was relating that to was like post-apocalyptic movies.
Oh yeah.
That's like, there's like, we're walking around, we've seen two people, and it's like a highly developed area. Like where are all the people?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then we actually went to one of the areas where they were rebuilding, and they've used empty train cars to sort of build up these businesses, and they've painted them like bright colors.
Or storage containers.
Storage containers. Yeah, it was interesting to see the way that the city was managing, I guess I would say, because I don't think that that's a permanent thing. But, you know, trying to keep some coffee shops and some restaurants sort of alive, because that's another thing we noticed is like you go out to get food or you go out to get a snack or coffee and there's nothing open because there's nobody there.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see like the disaster when you form up into a city, everyone's so dependent on everyone else. And that, you know, as people start to leave because their houses are broken up. And I guess what more defines that situation is that businesses start to leave because all the office buildings are gone. Businesses leave, all these jobs flood out of the cities, and then no one has anything left to do. And the city goes from being this massive thing to being this empty thing very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't been following too much of what's been going on in Christchurch since then, but it'd be interesting to know what the development it has been like since then, because I think one of the things about a big disaster like that is it gives a city a chance to rebuild in a way that's more suitable to current conditions. Because a lot of the way cities work is just kind of built on this momentum of the past.
Yeah, for sure.
And so if you do kind of start fresh almost, you can be more responsive to industries and just the way the world works now.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm wondering too, you know, have people started to come back? Because one thing that people did tell us is like, you know, people did leave, businesses left, families left. You know, if people had family somewhere else, like they went to that city.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be interesting to know sort of where Christchurch is at now.
So in New Zealand, we had pre-planned our most of our trip there. This was the last 3 weeks of a 6-month trip. And we had been in Australia beforehand, and we had booked onto a hop-on, hop-off bus tour with the stray bus beforehand in Australia. So we had most of our route through New Zealand planned already. Yeah,
for sure. And so in New Zealand, there's a few main options for getting around. Lots of people rent a car or
ride a sheep.
Ride a sheep from north to south.
Well, getting around for backpackers.
Yeah, sorry, getting around for backpackers, not for the locals. I think they just drive or fly.
Sheep.
Or ride sheep.
Yeah.
That's clearly how Ryan's going to get around when he moves to New Zealand, is riding a sheep. Screw horses and cars. We've got sheep. Anyways, backpackers tend to either rent a vehicle, whether that's renting a car or doing what we did in Australia, which is renting a van. So we rented through a company called Juicy. So Juicy also operates in New Zealand. And then there's another company called Wicked. And you basically rent a van. You've got like a little kind of fridge thing, like a cooler.
Stove
top, and then a fold down bed. And so, you know, that was great for us in Australia. And I think one of the reasons we didn't choose that in New Zealand is because we had just done it.
Yeah, we had just done 6 weeks of living out of a van in Australia, and we're looking for a bit of a change. I think it was also a little bit more expensive, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. So then we looked into, you know, a lot of people told us about this bus experience called Kiwi Experience. It's this big green bus, and it's basically just a bunch of 20-somethings hopping on and hopping off throughout New Zealand and pretty good time. And so when we went to book, we're like, okay, we want to do Kiwi experience. And this girl was like, well, you know, you're a couple, you're not on a gap year. Like, you might like this other bus better. It's a little bit more off the beaten path, a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not like just a big
shit show,
hookup fest.
But I think from it's kind of dependent on the group, because I mean, it seemed like Stray and Keep Experience go to a lot of the same places, just like a couple spots that are different. And then on Stray, there was a lot of partying and all that stuff too. But a bit of an older crowd, it seemed like. Yeah,
for sure. And so one of the great things about a bus like Stray Bus or Kiwi Experience is that...
Well, I guess you want to explain how it works first in case anybody doesn't know.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to talk about how you can pick different routes. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of step one, is like, where do you want to start? Where do you want to end? Because you can do it anywhere from basically like 3 to 5 days to, like, you could take months to do it. I think once you buy the pass, you have a whole year to use up your route. So you could basically take a year traveling on this one route, hopping on and hopping off as you please. So once you've picked your route and you've paid for your bus, you go online and you set up when you want to get picked up and dropped off. So you choose your dates, and the buses pick up and drop off on certain dates. So for example, you know, they come through Christchurch on like Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays. So you choose which day you want to get picked up and dropped off with the bus.
Yeah, and they have like a recommended time for every place, but you can extend your stay. So the bus we were on left, for example, Queenstown before we left, and we just hopped on with the next bus that came around.
Yeah, for sure. And so we started our stray experience in Christchurch, but the Christchurch to across the island to the west over to the Franz Josef Glacier was pretty interesting, because instead of just taking the bus, we actually took the Transalpine, which is a cross-country train. And it's kind of cool because I've heard so much about the Rocky Mountaineer, which goes between Banff in Alberta and Vancouver in British Columbia, so through the Rocky Mountains.
Doesn't it go to Jasper?
Yeah, it goes through Jasper, but it goes
to Banff too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think. If somebody's interested, maybe Google it and don't just quote me on it. I think it goes through Banff and Lake Louise, though. But, you know, I've always pictured that being really cool. So when we had this option to do the Transalpine, I was like, oh, this is going to be really, really wicked. Like, I just thought it would be such a cool experience, which it was.
I don't know. It kind of seemed like a bit of a letdown. And this is kind of something when people tell you to do something to look at the views from the transport, like we came across this in Patagonia. It's like, oh, you should really take a bus between like El Calafate and Bariloche because of the views.
There that's like a 30-hour bus.
Yeah, but it's like, oh, you look at the views. But it's like, I get on a bus, I'm going to eat some snacks, put on a podcast,
maybe watch some TV.
Yeah, watch a TV show. Like, you can only look at the view from the window of a bus for so long. And I found a similar experience on a train. It's like the stuff's going by and it's like, wow, that's nice. But you don't have the time to really absorb it because you're moving. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, and one thing that we talked about in our podcast episode on photography, journaling, and holding on to your memories, something that I'm working towards is trying to just really enjoy views from transportation, because you really can't get good photographs. Like getting a good photo of the mountains as you're ripping by them on a train, it's just not going to happen. And I think a lot of people, myself included, get so caught up in trying to get this photo of this great view, and then it really takes away from this experience that you're having. In saying that, I mean, train versus bus, like, I think the train was nice.
Yeah. Train was nice. The one thing is, I think it's an additional, so it costs more money, and for me, I don't know if it was worth it. And then we ran into some problems afterwards that kind of made me regret the train as well. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. So because we opted for this additional option, we were supposed to get picked up from the end of the Transalpine. It didn't drop right at the Franz Josef Glacier. You know, it stops at this small town. I can't remember what it was called. Some small Kiwi town with some probably difficult to pronounce name, because that seems to be a trend there. And, you know, we're waiting at the bus station, or the train station, sorry, and we're waiting and we're waiting. And then we go and ask, and we're like, oh, we're waiting for the stray bus. Has it come through? And they're like, oh, like, you know, these buses are often late. Like, I wouldn't worry. We're like, okay. We're waiting. And then we're like, can you call them? And we'd happened to meet two girls from the UK who were also waiting for the bus to come. And so this guy finally calls the bus for us, and the bus has just not stopped in this town. It like passed through and just hadn't stopped for us, and we hadn't seen it. So the bus had continued onwards without us. Mm-hmm. And we're like, well, that's great. Thanks for that. And so what did we do?
I guess a guy who knew the driver happened to drive us. We didn't happen to. The driver called him, and then we just got in this guy's car, and he drove us to catch up to the bus in like the next town, which was like an hour ahead of where we were, which was kind of an interesting experience. But I was quite upset at the time because he'd waited around for so long, and we'd paid quite a bit of money, and you feel like you're getting cheated in a way. And then it kind of bought, when we did catch up to the bus driver was very much like nonchalant about like leaving us at the train station for like over an hour sitting there. And, you know, he's like, oh, like, glad you made it. Like, pop on the bus. And
yeah.
So I was really kind of feeling like maybe some sort of recognition of like, oh, I'm sorry for that. Like, I hope we can make it up to you or something. It wasn't a great first impression of Stray for me.
Yeah, for sure. Something that just came to mind is, you know, in Canadian culture, it would be very much like, oh, we're so sorry for this.
But no, it's not a culture thing. It's just an individual thing.
Okay. I was just going to ask, like, do you think it is, you know, us expecting that apology is bringing some of our culture into New Zealand culture?
No, because I think New Zealand culture is probably as very close to Canadian.
So you think it was just a rude person who's...
I think it's just the guy's not taking personal responsibility for his mistake.
Okay. Yeah.
He doesn't want to say, I'm sorry, because him saying I'm sorry would imply that he did something wrong. And he doesn't want to say he did something wrong. And maybe he feels like he didn't do something wrong because he wasn't told that there was people to pick up. So maybe it was someone above him's mistake. And he doesn't feel like
he owes us apology because it wasn't his mistake. It was somebody else's mistake above him.
Yeah. But the thing is, he is the Stray representative there, and someone at Stray made a mistake.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we got a confirmation that we were going to get picked up there. And so somebody on that end of it made a mistake. And I mean, if we hadn't confirmed that, I wouldn't be sitting here being like, oh, that's their bad. It'd be our bad.
Yeah. So then we did hop on the bus. And one of the things that we were looking forward to about doing this bus trip is having some more interactions with people. Because we did find driving around ourselves in Australia, it gets a bit lonely at times.
It's a lot of Ryan and Amanda time.
Yeah. And you go to hostels, which is one of the cool things, and we'll talk about when we do talk about Australia, is that you can go into stay at hostels and just park in their parking lots when you've got the van rentals. So we met some people like that, but didn't meet a ton of people. So going on to a Stray bus, you're going to be seeing quite a few people for quite a bit of time. Also, like people sharing something in common. They're there to travel around. So we get on the bus, and it's just like everyone knows each other already because they've all been on the bus together since like Christchurch or other places. And it kind of it made me feel a bit anxious and uneasy because like, oh, I'd missed all this opportunity to get to know people. Everyone knows each other now, and like now we're just like these outsiders.
Yeah, and it was a little bit uncomfortable because I sort of felt like people were a little bit upset with us because they'd been waiting around for us. Did you sort of feel anything with that as well, or?
Yeah, maybe a bit. And one thing about it was there was a whole bunch of German people on the bus. So they were all interacting with each other in German. And it's a thing we've experienced quite a few times traveling, when you get a pack of people together who are speaking a language you don't understand. I think it's kind of a natural reaction to put some negative stories onto those people.
Yeah.
Because you feel like everyone wants to fit in and feel connected. Like, that's a pretty base human need. And then if you have a whole group of people speaking a language you don't understand, you feel like almost like slighted, like, oh, they're talking, they've pushed me out of the group by speaking in their own language.
Yeah, definitely. I can completely relate with that feeling. And I struggle so hard as a native English speaker because I don't want to be that person who's like, everybody needs to speak English. And I shouldn't put that on other people either. But I think that I have met people traveling who are like, oh, people just need to speak English. Like, it's the universal language. Well, I mean, it is the language in a lot of countries, but it's not the language everywhere. Do you know what I mean?
I don't really get what you're referring to.
What I'm trying to say is that when a bunch of people are speaking German, I mean, it's hard for me in my head not to be like, well, you speak English, so could you not speak in English so that I understand too?
Mm-hmm. But that's the thing. I think it's more of it's not their responsibility to include you in a conversation.
No, it's not at all.
Like, if you were assertive, you could start talking to them in English, and I'm sure that would change the conversation to English. And I think it's important to remember that people aren't slighting you by speaking to each other because we've had
speaking in your native language is way easier.
That's like we've had similar situations when we were in South America where there was a couple of Spanish speakers who didn't speak great English, but marginal, but not enough to really understand a conversation between native speakers. And then maybe us two and maybe a couple other native speaking English people. And then we had, for example, there was one situation where there's this French girl who speaks Spanish, doesn't speak great English. And then we just end up reverting to English, not because we're slighting her, but because we're scared to speak Spanish. But then just from her standpoint, it might look like we're trying to exclude her from conversations because we're speaking English. So I think it's just important to remember, if you are in that situation when people are speaking another language, it's not, I think it's kind of a natural reaction to feel like you're being isolated and pushed away. And that's not what's going on. It's maybe they feel more comfortable. Not maybe, they obviously feel more comfortable speaking in a native language.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great example. I completely forgot about that happening. And now that I think about that, I actually feel kind of bad about that situation, putting in context how I felt on that stray bus that first day. It doesn't feel nice to feel like you're being discluded, and, those people weren't doing it on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
In saying that, we've kind of talked about sort of the negative experiences that we had with Stray. I feel like it really did pick up from there.
Yeah, absolutely. From there, it was pretty much positive. And the first night we stayed in, I don't know what the name of the place is, but right beside the Franz Josef Glacier.
Yeah, and it was a pretty cool place. It was big log building with a massive kitchen in it where everybody from the bus was cooking a meal, and it was awesome because we got the chance to meet a lot of people at that point. And then we were staying in rooms with bunk beds, and everything was made out of logs. So it's just a really cool setting. We're in this really small town in New Zealand. We're in the middle of the mountains. It's absolutely beautiful. And then we're staying at this cool rustic lodge. I thought it was a really cool experience. Yeah.
And then the next day we went and did a hike up the Franz Josef Glacier, which was also really cool.
Yeah. So, I grew up in Alberta, but I've still never been to Jasper, which is where the Columbia ice fields are, which is apparently a really, really cool experience. And you can walk on the glacier there. and something I've always wanted to do. So it was really cool to be able to have this glacier walk experience. What was your experience like walking on the glacier?
So I guess if you haven't done a glacier walk, you're not supposed to do it by yourself. I don't know if you probably could, hypothetically. So it's with a guide, and everyone's kind of suited up in some cold weather gear, although it was quite warm, so I was wearing shorts. Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but you're wearing crampons, which are like the picks on your feet. I think we had poles.
Yeah, poles and then boots as well.
Yeah, so they have a trail marked out, but I guess because it's changing so fast, the trail's always got to be changed. And there was a couple parts where there was ladders over crevasses and stuff. Yeah, it's hard to describe what it's like though, but it's cool because it's just this massive thing of ice. So as you're walking on it, you can hear it kind of creaking and cracking, and there's water running down different places and cool formations. And it's weird. It's very bright to walk on. Does my descriptive imagery work in?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I've experienced it too. So yeah, I'm definitely, what you're saying is resonating with me.
Is walking on a glacier cooler than walking on the ground?
100%.
I mean, it is ice, right?
Yeah. One thing I didn't realize about, good one. Took me a second there. One thing that's really cool that I didn't know before walking on the glacier is that the ice I knew it was constantly moving and changing and growing and shrinking, and I didn't realize how fast it happens.
Yeah.
Our guide was saying that we have, he'd be carving out a new route for us on the way back of this like 3-hour hike. And I'm like, what? Are you serious?
Yeah. It's weird because you think of like water as this is going to sound stupid, but like water is this very liquid thing and ice as this very solid thing. And like obviously liquid, solid there. But like when ice, when it's in a big thing like that, it's more like liquidy almost. Like if you were to look at it sped up a little bit, it's just like kind of moving like liquid. It's always, I feel like that was kind of dumb. Because it's just like the fact that the ice is melting is what's moving. Anyways, ignore what I just said, people.
No, don't ignore it, because it is a cool sort of concept, and it's really hard to wrap your brain around how this massive chunk of ice that you think of as liquid is like slowly sliding through.
Or you think of as solid?
Yeah, sorry, that you think of as solid is slowly sliding through this valley between mountains. Because when you think about
you think of it, it's
ice is solid, and then you think of like concrete is solid, it's really hard to imagine a giant road sliding. Yeah,
so you picture it as like, oh, I'm walking on this big ice block. It's going to be there and icy, but it's very like malleable, and it's moving and changing and doing all this freaky stuff.
Yeah, and it's you get on it and it's so big and it's scary. Like it is scary to know that it's changing, and that if that guide left us, it's like, ooh, like how do I get back down from here when, that path that we just took could be a giant hole into the depths of this glacier.
Yeah. Walking over the crevasses on the ladders is kind of sketchy. And the tour we did was the hike up, but you could also do a helicopter up to get higher up the glacier and get a cooler view. And you can also skydive in Franz Josef too.
Yeah, I mean, New Zealand has so much to offer in terms of outdoor stuff. Walking on a glacier is just one of the cool things that you can do there, and pretty much every town you go to is like that.
Yeah, lots of outdoor adventure, extreme activities. And those are kind of the activities we did at our next stop, which was Queenstown.
So Queenstown is the adventure, extreme activity capital of New Zealand, if not New Zealand and Australia, I would say.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Whistler of New Zealand.
Yeah, for sure. It's cool. How do you even describe it? I mean, it's got a lot of bars and restaurants and great places to eat and fun things to do and a lot of outdoor activities.
But yeah, the setting is it's right on a lake. in the mountains. So in the winter, there's a couple ski hills around there, I believe, and in the summer, like hiking and all sorts of other stuff to do, bungee jumping, skydiving, jet boating, some sort of downhill go-kart thing, mountain biking. One of the things about New Zealand that's really cool is they have, I think, more sensical liability laws. So whereas in Canada you couldn't do, a lot of these extreme activities are feasible, but you have to pay way more expensive insurance because negligence is so much broader. I'm not a legal expert, so I'm not sure of this, but it's much harder to get sued. I think if you sign a release form in New Zealand, that actually means something, whereas in Canada, not so much.
Yeah, for sure. And so it's a very popular area to do these sort of extreme activities.
Mm-hmm.
And for as long as I can remember, I've had it on my bucket list to go bungee jumping and skydiving. And so setting out on this crazy once in a lifetime trip after university, which is kind of how I looked at it at the time, I was like, I have to do these things.
And we had planned to do these activities in New Zealand for a long time because we had, in Australia, there's quite a few spots to do skydiving. And then in Interlaken in Switzerland, there's bungee jumping and canyoning and a lot of other extreme activities. And we kind of saved, we're like, no, it's way cheaper in New Zealand. It's the end of the trip. We're going to spend the last of our money doing all these activities there. So we had been waiting months to do some of this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And the first commercial bungee jump ever was actually developed just outside of Queenstown by a company called AJ Hackett. And so AJ Hackett Bungee is like the bungee company in New Zealand. And our stray bus actually stopped at the Burge bungee, which is this first commercial bungee, on our way in. And it was so surreal because we're on a bus and we're like, oh, you know, like we're bungee jumping today. That's happening. But like not entirely sure. Like we're like, maybe we just book it today. Like we don't really know. And then we show up at this Burge bungee and they do this video and then they're like, okay, so who's doing this bungee jump? And it's just, I'm smiling a lot right now because just thinking about that memory is so crazy to me because it was something I'd wanted to do for so long and it really scared me. So to actually be there being like, oh my God, I'm doing this right now was just, it was amazing.
Why did you want to bungee jump?
That's a good question. I mean, part of it is an ego thing. Like, oh, I've bungee jumped. Another thing is, for me is, you know, personal. So being able to be like, I can do anything. I jumped off a bridge. I jumped off out of a plane. Like I can do anything. And that kind of, you know, coming home after doing these things, I would go to do something and I'd be like, oh, I jumped out of a plane. Like I can do this.
Is that something you thought about?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
You know, like doing those like mundane things like, oh, I'm scared to call this person at work because they might be mad because, you know, the company I work for has done this awful thing and I have to deal with it now. And it's like, I don't want to do this, but I jumped out of a plane, so I can do this. Maybe that sounds silly to you, but it's definitely something that stuck in my head for a long time.
Yeah, I guess it will just, I'm not completely relating to it because I think for me, like there's not much of a risk.
What do you mean by that?
So like if you're, you know, accomplishing something that can give you faith in the future to be able to accomplish other things, whereas I don't really think you're accomplishing much by bungee jumping.
Yeah. No,
like you get an adrenaline rush and I guess you embrace how you place trust in, you know, the facts that it's safe, and then your body's like, no, and you're kind of overcome your body's fear reaction to do something. But
yeah, no, that's a different way to look at it for sure. I think for me it was, I've always kind of put on this like mask or put on this thing where I was like, oh, I'm not scared of anything. And bungee jumping, like if we're being truthful, like it scared me. It was terrifying. I was like, I don't want to throw myself off this bridge. Like that's scary. And so to be able to do that and overcome this personal fear for myself, I felt good about that.
Yeah, I remember I felt very good afterwards when you bungee jumped and skydived too. It's quite like contrasting the two. You bungee jumping, you're kind of in more control. Like you have it to decide to leap off whatever you're on, whereas skydiving is kind of like you hang out of the plane and then the guy behind you kind of
throws you out.
It's just like, this is happening right now. Whereas bungee jumping, like there's kind of this moment, like this decision point.
Yeah, for sure. And so when we did the bridge bungee, we actually did it in tandem. So Ryan and I did it together, which was pretty cool. It was just so crazy how fast it happened. Like we watched this video, we paid our money, we stepped on the scale, they weighed us, and within 5 minutes of paying, we were up on this bridge, being strapped in together and being walked through the process. And then even more than that, so the bridge is over top of a river, and they're like, oh, do you want to get dunked in the river? And we're like, let's just touch our hands. And so the guy's like, yeah, for sure. And so Ryan and I jump, and we got dunked to our waist. So my memory is like trying to breathe and having water in my nose and not being able to see and my heart racing and like shaking and having this like crazy awesome feeling in my stomach and just being like, holy fuck, I just jumped off a bridge.
Yeah, it's cool because like you're falling and you have enough time to kind of be like, holy shit. And then like you're expecting to be pulled up before the water, and then you're just like sploosh, like right into the water, and then you get yanked out from behind. Yeah, it's definitely very cool. And the difference between, so we did that bridge bungee together, and then the Nevis bungee, which is the biggest one in New Zealand.
Yeah, it's 134 meters tall, or I think 440 feet, and it's over a canyon.
Yeah, and that one was frightening as well because there's a kind of a, I guess like a cable car in the middle, and you kind of take a different cable car out to it, and then you're just hanging there waiting around to jump off this gigantic thing.
Yeah, and one thing for me was like, you know, I go across, or I guess I'll start from the beginning of the day. Like I felt nervous, but because I've always really liked rides as a child. So I've kind of like put this, like I mentioned before, this shield up that I'm not afraid of things like this, but my stomach was churning. I was terrified. They weigh you like 4 times. And I was like, really guys, like stop. I've weighed the same amount. You put in this like 5-pound harness, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I getting into? I have a 5-pound harness on, which I don't know why that intimidated me so much, but it did. And then we're in a group of, it's me and a bunch of guys. And so I'm like, okay, the heaviest is going to go first. I'll be last. We go across in this cable car, and I guess the last girl to have jumped in that group was the same weight as me. So I get called first. And for me, I'm like, I'm not mentally prepared. Like I was prepared to watch all these other guys jump. I wanted to see Ryan jump first. And they're like you're jumping now. Like you're going. And it's very much like they just move you through the process without really letting you think about it, which I think is better because people would walk away from it. But before you know it, it's like, oh, smile on the camera as they're strapping you into it. And then it's like, okay, like go to the front. Oh, don't look down. I looked down, obviously. Terrifying. Oh, look up at the camera. Okay, 3, 2, 1, bungee. And then it's like, the only thing I remember after jumping was like, this must be what flying's like. That's the only thought I remember having after jumping off the Nevis was like, I'm flying.
Really? Is that what you were thinking that at the time?
Yeah, I think that came right after, holy fuck, I just jumped. It was like, I'm flying. What were you thinking?
I don't think I was thinking anything. I was just like, holy crap. Whoa. Like, that's like the feeling is like, just as like verbalized.
Yeah, it's
awesome
crazy
rush you get from the adrenaline. But I was kind of thinking about, as we were talking about going out and waiting and getting prepared, what you had said earlier about feeling like doing bungee helped you in other areas of your life. And it has, like, I can relate to that sense of fear. Like, my body feels this, like, you know, kind of physical anxiety about jumping off something, even though my mind's like, okay, this is safe, you can do this. My body's like, no. And then I've related that to job interviews.
Yeah.
Like, it's like this almost the exact same feeling. Job interviews, even doing this podcast, you know, the first time we did it, it's like this, I don't know feeling, but I feel like bungee jumping is easier afterwards. It's just like, yeah, okay, you jump, you get this exhilaration.
Yeah. I guess what I was trying to say is that bungee jumping seemed like such a big obstacle. Like, it's like, okay, I threw myself off this bridge. Like, you know, I did this crazy thing that a lot of people are just too scared to do. And then, so when I feel fear on a day-to-day basis for sort of more mundane things, like, I think it's fair to say that a lot of people feel fear when you go into an awkward situation, like going to a job interview. Like, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, and it's scary.
But I guess I don't really identify with seeing it as like a big accomplishment.
I guess for me, and it's not something that I do anymore, but probably for the first 6 months to a year after coming back, anytime I went into a situation where I felt scared of doing something that was more mundane, like a job interview, for example, it was like, you bungee jumped, like, you've overcome something that was very scary for you. Like, you can do this. If I can jump out of a plane, I can go to this job interview and kill it. I guess is something that just was kind of in my head. So I don't know. I guess you don't look like you're relating to it. Obviously, our listeners can't see us.
I do. It's just like, I kind of relate to the sense of just getting some more experience with being afraid of something and then walking through that fear and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It's just, I feel like I don't relate as much to feeling like it's this big accomplishment.
Yeah, no, and that's totally fair. I think for me, because I was kind of hiding behind this, like, oh, I'm going to bungee jump, like, I'm not scared of it. I was kind of putting on this front that it was something that was just like very easy for me, when really it wasn't. I think that's where it came from for me, was really being honest with myself. Like, you were scared to do that and you did it, and that's awesome. Like, you can do anything.
Yeah, no, I do. I think I relate to it in a lot of ways too, because I think so much about the way I was taught to grow up was to play it safe, and I think that's a pretty common thing. So I think a lot of people we avoid situations that scare us,
Mm-hmm.
Without really even thinking about it. Like, oh, I don't want to go to this party tonight because I got to study for something. But it's like, that's just an excuse because you feel uncomfortable. And not to say that going to a party is the best thing ever, but like, situations that scare us, we tend to avoid. And so it kind of gives you this landmark for feeling afraid and walking through it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think
and then it's cool because you get this gigantic, like, you're afraid and then you do it and then you're exhilarated, like, ding, 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 3 seconds. You go through this gigantic swing in emotion, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the adrenaline rush, how would you describe that?
I don't know. It's hard
one word.
It's like, oh, wow. Just that sad.
It's so awesome.
Yeah.
Do you feel uncomfortable that you just did that?
A little bit. So what else did we do in Queenstown? We went skydiving.
So we did a bridge bungee, the Nevis bungee. We actually did a bungee swing as well when we were right after our Nevis bungee, but I feel like that it sort of gets like overshadowed because it wasn't as exhilarating as the Nevis bungee.
Yeah, that's like the ugly stepsister of the Nevis bungee. The bungee swing. That's fun.
It was fun though, and I mean, if bungee jumping is completely out of the realm of what you're capable to push yourself to do, I think the bungee swing is an amazing way to get an adrenaline rush and push yourself to do something that maybe you wouldn't do every day.
And so for skydiving, what I found really cool about it was there's this, like, So when you start free falling, like you get at bungee jumping, it's only a second, but your body, we talked about earlier about being in Christchurch, your mind's trying to relate this to something it knows. And it's like, what is happening right now? Holy fuck, I'm falling. Versus when you're skydiving, you can do that, holy fuck, I'm falling thing. And then you kind of adjust. And then you're just met with this sense of like, wow, amazement, as you've kind of adjusted through this immediate pit in your stomach, what's going on thing, into this, wow, I'm falling, this is amazing. And you get like a minute of it. Versus bungee jumping, you never really get past that, holy fuck, I'm falling thing.
Yeah, so we did a skydive from 15,000 feet, and you free fall for 10,000 feet, and it only takes you, I think it's between 60 and 90 seconds to go down 10,000 feet. And it's pretty crazy because you go up in this tiny little prop plane that doesn't even have seats. It's got like old school gym mats on the ground, and you're sitting in the legs of your tandem skydiving person. And all of the instructors in our plane were Eastern European. So I've just got this like Slovenian man who's like, okay, you sit in my lap now. It's like, okay, I'm uncomfortable. And then, you know, as we're going up, I can see he's got a watch on that says how high we're going. He's like, oh, like we're at 9,000 feet now. And I'm like, oh my God, we have to go up 6,000 more feet in this tiny prop plane that I feel like could like sputter and come to a stop at any time. And so, yeah, then, I mean, I was the last one of the plane. So I saw Ryan go. I saw a 6-year-old go. And I was like, well, ego's coming out here. There's no way I'm asking to go back down in the plane now. Not that I was thinking that. But then they literally just tip you to the plane, and my instinct was to scream, and I literally didn't have enough air to let it out. Like I tried and it just couldn't happen. And then, yeah, like Ryan said, you're falling, and it's like you can't think or breathe or see or anything for the first like 20 seconds. And then
you can see.
Kind of, but it's so fast. It's like your brain is so overwhelmed you can't process anything, and then it kind of just almost normalizes it, and you're like, wow, I'm falling through the sky, this is crazy.
Yeah There's like very much a sense of exhilaration, and it kind of brings this like joy of being alive that kind of carries on afterwards.
Yeah, and after they pull the parachute, you kind of glide down. Did you like that part?
Yeah, no, it's cool to get to see some stuff. It was fairly quick though. My guy did some quicker circle things, and we were on the ground fairly speedily. I don't know if that's a word, but I like Whatever.
it. It's I don't even know what other words to describe. I think my words that I'll use for description are like crazy, awesome, exhilarating. Like you literally leave that type of experience high on life.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like life is awesome.
Yeah. Speaking of life is awesome, there was one of my favorite attraction in Queenstown was probably Ferg Burger and the attached Ferg Baker restaurants.
So Ferg Burger is pretty legendary, to say the least. And it's kind of funny because I actually met somebody not too long ago who'd been in New Zealand. I'm like, oh, did you go to Ferg Burger? And they're like, come on. I obviously went to Ferg Burger, and they're like, has a burger ever been the same to you since Ferg Burger? And I was like, no, it hasn't been. Like, that's how good it is.
Yeah, it's pretty spectacular.
And so Ferg Burger is this like I said, legendary burger shop in Queenstown. It's always busy. It's open 23 hours a day. So it closes for 1 hour. Not too sure why. You can get gluten-free buns. You can get like chicken burgers, venison, lamb. They have this like epically big burger that's 2 patties, couple of eggs, some bacon. It's like $20, and it's probably the size of my head. But it's hard because you start eating it and you're like, I'm full, but I'm only half done this burger, and it's so good that I'm not going to stop. So it's kind of funny because then you go to a hostel, like staying in a hostel dorm, you get like everybody's taking these afternoon naps, and it's like, oh, Ferg Burger.
Yeah, Ferg
and
Burger.
And everybody
naps.
Just knows. It's like, oh yeah, Ferg Burger.
Yeah. And then Ferg Baker has lots of really cool meat pies. And in New Zealand, they call them kiwi pies. Like they've claimed them for themselves, but like it's just a little pot pie. But I really, really liked them. And I guess it's popular in Australia too, but I don't think it's quite as popular. But Ferg Baker had some awesome pies.
What was the best one you had?
I think it was a venison and pepper pie or something. Ugh, I'm hungry. But I remember thinking,
I'm kind of hungry.
we're going to Queenstown. We'll be back in 2 weeks. But I remember thinking
2 weeks, like 2 years.
Thinking that we'll be set up in Queenstown and podcasting in 2 weeks.
Don't worry about me. I'm just going to gain 100 pounds at Ferg Burger.
But I remember thinking while we were in Queenstown, like this would be an awesome place to stay a while.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I kind of fell in love with Queenstown in terms of, it's a small little town. It's got this amazing restaurant, a few other really nice places to eat. It's got all these extreme activities. Like I could just work for AJ Hackett and bungee jump every day.
I think the thought did cross my mind. Like, oh, that'd be a cool place to work. I remember thinking after skydiving, like, oh, I should get my skydivers instructors thing. It'd be awesome to skydive every day.
It would be cool.
It'd probably get normalized, and you just, I hate my job. Like the pilot of the plane, such a douche.
Like, oh, this person was so heavy when we jumped today. Took their banana properly.
Yeah, all these normal concerns into something so cool. But we're actually going to split up this podcast into two. So we'll resume on the next podcast talking more about Queenstown and then the rest of our experiences in New Zealand. We're going to have show notes and some photos on our website, theworldwanderers.com. And we've got an email address now. So what we'd really love if you have any thoughts on the podcast, we're new at this and still trying to improve. Please send us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. If there's anywhere you'd like us to talk about, if there's any co-hosts you would like to see not on the podcast anymore.
Hint, Ryan. Just kidding.
Maybe let us know. The email is theworldwanderers@gmail.com.
It's theworldwanderspodcast@gmail.com.
Womp womp.
Theworldwanderers@gmail.com was taken.
Yeah, so send angry emails to that.
Theworldwanderers@gmail.com. You stole our thing.
Yeah, so send angry emails to that one. Feedback, maybe angry too. You can tell us we suck if you want to. The World Wanderers podcast @gmail.com. And we will see you next time.
Thanks so much.